Hi there, girls. Great to see you. My name's Ruth, and I want to welcome you to Ruth's Home Truth podcast. We are here to chat about all things dating, relationships, and marriage, and it's specifically for Christian girls, and particularly for those of you who might be a little bit older, so probably late 20s to mid 40s, who are still trying to get the dating scene to work and just having a few struggles there. So over the next few weeks, we're going to be meeting with a couple of different girls, married, single, dating girls, just to tell us a little bit about their journeys with the relationship kind of path that they've taken, any tips and tricks and strategies that they might have, any wisdom they want to share with us, some of their stories, because I find stories to be really encouraging. You'll find that everyone has their own journey, and we all get there in the end, and I want to give you the hope for that. And I also want to promote to you my new book, which is called Off the Shelf, Traditional Dating Truths for the Modern Christian Woman. And I don't have it in my hands yet, but it will be coming out from the publishers very soon. And that will be available for purchase online and in all major bookstores, including Koorong, which is very exciting. So sit back, enjoy the show. You can play it as a video or audio, maybe as you're going to work or on your lunch break, and just hear some different thoughts from different girls in the Christian scene about what the dating pathway is like for everyone that's out there. So look forward to catching up with you regularly. Okay, bye. Hi girls, welcome back to Ruth's podcast, Ruth's Home Truths. Today we are joined by the lovely Nadine. Hi Nadine.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. Nadine is 30 years old and she's been married to Caleb for just over 6 years and has two beautiful little children. And Nadine actually happens to be a qualified psychologist, so she'll be able to shed some light on the situation for us. So Nadine, thanks for joining us. And I guess my first question is, what has drawn you to be interested in this kind of discussion about relationships and dating?
Yeah, look, I think I'm passionate about relationships. And I think even in my studies, I've realized more and more that we don't function as individuals. We function in the context of relationships, whether that's with our parents as a child, siblings, and then as we get older with a partner, a husband, a wife, and then our children. So I think when as I've been seeing some of the home truths that you've been posting, a lot of things resonated and got me really excited, because it's things that we don't see that common anymore. There's this big emphasis on living life for me and what makes me happy, and sometimes relationships can get neglected in that. So I think, I thought I'd be really excited to have a chat to you and learn from you as well.
Look, hey, I'm just on the journey with everyone else, so
Yeah, aren't we all?
And as I've told you, I'm quite pregnant, so my brain's quite mushy. So all the single girls, this will happen to you one day. Enjoy your sharp brain while you've got it. So Nadine, can you just give us a little bit of background for your dating story and your marriage story and that type of thing? However, detailed as you want.
Okay. I think my brain's been a bit mushy too, because I've got a 4-month-old, so I had to rethink about all of this. But I didn't really have any boyfriends before my husband, and I think one of the reasons for that is I was actively serving in my church. I was part of the youth team. At the time, I think I was also I just kind of graduated from Bible or leadership college, so I was very much immersed in the evangelical church scene. And there was this unwritten maybe or emphasis that if you date to marry. And I think I felt that pressure a bit. So I was very wary of who I spent time one-on-one, because one, I didn't want to give any guys the impression that I wanted to marry them. And two, I didn't know how to navigate that either, if there wasn't a step in between, because for me, marriage was such a big commitment and a big step. I was, in my late teens, 17, 18, 19 at this stage. So I was quite not reserved. I had a lot of guy friends, but it was never like, I can't just go on a date with you. Like that's I have to figure out first if you're a potential husband before I can go have coffee with you. So by the time I got to my mid-20s,
Yeah.
um, I started feeling really lonely, and I guess I started becoming worried that maybe I won't meet someone. I'm from South Africa originally, so I had this kind of fear that, maybe I could only marry an Afrikaans South African guy, and there was only about one in my church, and we didn't really have a chemistry. So I kind of made this big thing in my head because of this underlining, and look, I don't think that the church even advertently preached this, but it was kind of like this message that maybe I perceived, that you can only date if you want to marry someone.
Yeah.
And when my current husband, we were serving on the youth together, and he was a bit old. He's 3 years older than me, but at that stage you have the above 25s that hung out and the below 25s that spend time together. And I was in the below 25s, group with the kind of dorky younger kids,
Yeah.
and he was in the older, mature, kind of mysterious people. So we never really, spend time together. And he's not, he's more reserved and a little bit more quiet. So it wasn't like I even, I think I said 2 words to him in the first 2 years that we served together on the youth ministry. And to be honest, I also didn't think he'd be interested in me. I thought he was quite attractive, and a lot of girls seemed to like him, and I just didn't think he'd be interested in me. So eventually one of my good friends became good friends with him, and that's how we became friends. And I think to this day we argue about who liked each other first, because I was a bit reserved, thinking he won't like me. So I never really went there in my head, where he reckons I did. I think we just became real good friends. And because I didn't have this am I going to marry him or not, that was taken away because I didn't think he'd be interested in me. I think I was a bit more myself around him. And he says that really attracted him to me. Like, he felt like I was like a normal Christian girl. I wasn't weird around him. And
what do you think,
yeah,
like,
we just
that weirdness, do you think that other girls were giving off those kind of vibes in the dating scene in your church?
Yeah, I do. Like, there was he's mentioned to me that some girls will come to him after like a, spiritual like awakening night and be like, God told me we're going to get married. And he was a bit like, oh crap, he didn't tell me. Like, are we, like, what does this mean? So I think he was quite freaked out by, because he was a new Christian at that stage too. So he's a bit, just didn't know what that meant. Where for me, like, I didn't go to him with some prophecy that I felt God spoke to me about, and we just had fun. We were able to just have a laugh and just be normal.
And so did
Yeah.
it start with him asking you on a proper date, or was it just hanging out? Or
Yeah, funnily enough, it was just after the Brisbane floods back in 2011, and I remember him asking me. One of my friends said, Caleb likes you, and I was like, no, it's not interested. And then, a week after that, Caleb texted me and said, did you want to grab a coffee in South Bank? And I was like, oh, do you want me to invite the rest? And he's like, no, I thought just me and you. And that's when the penny kind of dropped, and I was like, oh my gosh, what does this mean? And then again, I'm like, well, do I go have coffee with him? Do I not? Do I, like? And I just decided I'm not going to overthink this. I'll go have coffee with him and just see where the night takes us. And he was very upfront. He was kind of like, I really like you. I think, we have a lot of fun together. Why don't we just, go on a few dates and see if there's something there? I think the regret I have is because I had this perception of, you date to get married, I was afraid to tell anyone about dating him. So we kept that a secret, just the two of us. And we burnt a lot of friendships through that because people felt that we were being deceitful. And I think for us, we were just trying to figure out, because we were serving in a youth ministry together, we wanted to know first if this was real or just a crush, before we actually told people. And in hindsight, I think we shouldn't have been that over anxious about it. We should have just been like, we're going to go on a few dates and see if there's something. And if there's not, deal with it then, kind of thing. But luckily we liked each other, and, we're still married.
And so you both kind of were exploring that dating time together, weren't you? Both seeing how you felt.
Yeah.
Both taking an interest. And
Definitely, it was new territory for both of us. Before he, kind of started seeing me, he came out of a 2-year relationship before he was a Christian. So, very different dating scene to me. So yeah, we were kind of exploring what that was like together.
Mm.
It was tricky. It was
Yeah.
definitely tricky. Yeah.
What do you think were some of the main challenges for you guys during your, courtship process, I guess you could say?
Oh, courtship's a great word, hey? I think the first challenge was because when we finally told our friends and our church leaders that that we've been dating, the first challenge was navigating that, because there was a lot of what do you mean you didn't kind of speak to us first about this? Were you sexually pure? So there was a lot of that kind of backlash, and then we got defensive and was like, kind of like, stuff you guys, we know better.
Yeah.
So I think that, and then we were kind of a bit like, we would fight and we almost wouldn't have someone to go to when we fought, because we cut everyone off. So that
Yeah.
that was a bit challenging, and we would have, I remember one day we were just having this massive arguments, and we were getting so passionately angry at each other, and after we made up, I'm like, I don't fight with anyone the way I fight with you. Like, it was a bit like, what is this? And I think by God's grace, we actually took the time to work through that and say, well, I think I really care what you think. And I really care about, if you say something flippantly, that really makes me feel rejected. So I must really like you. Can we work through this? So we had a lot of those conversations as well.
And so you've mentioned the church a lot of times as the context for meeting and reflecting back on whether your relationship was good or bad and what people thought you should do. Do you think that's a common thing for Christian girls these days? And do you think that's appropriate to have the church as such a close context for the dating scene?
Yeah, look, I think yes and no. The Bible talks about the church being a place of where we grow, and it's where our mandate is to equip the saints. And if you are part of a church, you want to be growing as a disciple and as a woman of God. So I think to a degree there has to be a covering in that, where you can go to someone and be like, I'm dating, Joe Blow from the streets, and he's not a Christian, and like, there has to be a place where you can have wise counsel. There's I think the Bible's very clear that the older women have to give wise counsel to the younger women. So I think yes, in the sense of that, there needs to be a space for that. But I also feel like it can have extremes. Like, it can almost swing the other way sometimes, where there is a lot of pressure around just getting to know someone, or just even flirting. I think there's an element of innocent flirting that should be there should be room for in the church sometimes, and it shouldn't be a meeting with a pastor when you're having coffee with someone. So
Especially
I think,
when you're like
yes,
25 or something.
yeah, when you're an adult, and the pastor's 2 years older than you, and it's, so I think there's a balance, and kudos to pastors as well, because that would be difficult waters to kind of navigate too. The pastors we had at the time, I think they got married at a very young age, so this was maybe not something that they had experience in. So I think that's hard for them to then lead and shepherd from that point of view too.
Yeah, I get. And where do you think the family fits in? Because I feel like the church has become like the surrogate family for a lot of young adults. Like, we think of our covering and our leaders, and I've got to go tell the pastors, and what would Pastor so and so think? And you never really hear people talking about their parents anymore, or the eldership of their own parental and family context. Why do you think that is?
Oh, I think that's such a good question. In a perfect world, I think you shouldn't let the church educate or the school educate your kids and teach them about life. It should be mum and dad. And I think even that's my heart. I want my kids to come to me first before they go to anyone else. I'd love for them to have mentors and guidance in their life, but ultimately, I think that's part of my role as their mother. I think particularly now, because we've got access to so much knowledge, You know, and for me, I was a bit, you know, I think I thought I knew it all. And why would I talk to my mum? Because I grew up in a Christian home. So, you know, my parents love God and brought me up, you know, often reading bedtime Bible stories and praying together. But we had different views as far as Holy Spirit goes and all of those things. So for me, I was like, oh, I'd rather talk to, you know, my pastors about this because they align more with what I feel like fits with me than my parents. Where my parents are a bit more kind of date someone, see what's going on there. Like they were a little bit more like casual around that. And I think they don't want me to take things too seriously too young, because they wanted me to make wise decisions. So I think today there's a lot of yeah, I don't know, does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, it's a tricky question. It's like, is there a right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It just seems like all of a sudden everyone who's, you know, between 18 and 30, all of a sudden like the church is the be all and end all of what I'm allowed to do and what I should do, you know, and I just wonder if that's accurate or appropriate.
Yeah, I would always encourage that you know, if you've got a good healthy relationship with your parents, speak to them, you know, see what your mum says, even if you might have different you know, worldviews, or they know you, they're still your parents, they love you, they want the best for you. And we have blind spots when we're younger that we don't always see, and when we're in love we have massive blind spots. So I think it's really important to honor the family home, and ultimately I guess in a perfect world you would have the family together in the same church, so that would almost be a synergy. But I don't think that's the case for many people. I think most people now go to different churches to their parents. That seems to be a common thing today.
Yeah, and you mentioned how we have so much extra knowledge these days, which is so true. And I know that I'm feeling in my own life and seeing in all my friends, like everyone's so overeducated almost that like, oh, we don't need anyone to guide us or tell us what to do. And I think that actually can impact women when they get married as well, because we've got such a feministic culture. But being a professional, you know, career type person yourself, have you found that to be an interesting challenge, getting married and now being at home with little babies? You know, what's that been like?
Oh, absolutely. I think my whole sense of identity got rocked when I became a mum, completely, because everything that I saw on TV and on Facebook and Instagram and you know, in movies was not really becoming realistic in my life. You know, there's this big emphasis on feminism and being a strong, independent woman. But what does that mean when you're in a family and life's not about you? You know, when you can't. I said to my sister the other day, like, I just miss being able to sleep, eat, and pee when I want to, and I just can't anymore. Like, you know, half the time when I'm in the bathroom, I've got a 1-year-old sitting on my lap because they don't want to leave me alone. So, becoming a mum is really dying to yourself, and I think that message doesn't get preached on media platforms at all. If anything, I think there's a big emphasis on self-compassion in the psych world, you know, and look, it's not a bad thing. I think self-care is so important, and I think being able to really know yourself and be vulnerable with your insecurities and being able to share that with people is so important. But we have to be very careful that it doesn't become all about me and a selfish desire, rather than you know, loving yourself in order to love others. So I think that's really skewed people's expectation of what being a wife and being a mum would be like, because it's not about you. Even for me, when I was, you know, wanting a husband and the idea of a family, it was the pretty picture that I painted in my head of, you know, my husband's going to take me on beautiful dates and my kids are going to, you know, and we do have that, like that's definitely part of it, but you don't see all the self-sacrifice that leads up to that as well. And I think there's a divine order that God has created. The Bible talks about the role of a woman being a helper, and that scares a lot of women today because, well, I'm not less important than him, and it's like, well, no, that's the word that it uses for God sometimes in the Old Testament, and the Holy Spirit in the New Testament. Like, that's a very important role. It's not less significant, but if I'm trying to compete with my husband and say, well, the parenting needs to be equal and the money making needs to be the same, I think that works for some people. But if it's that drive of I need to be a strong independent woman, but I want to have children and a husband and everything else, I don't, for me, that's just not a reality. So kudos to Caleb. Prior to having children, he's really encouraged me in my studies and in my career, and always encouraged me into my dreams and everything that I want to do. And he's never ever said, look, now you got to take a back step, you're going to become a mum, and you have to stay home with the kids. That's never been a conversation. But it's rather become a desire for me since having children. It's more about all of a sudden I want to put them first, and that's not always a feeling I feel. It's more a decision I've made, if that makes sense.
Yeah, good on you. It's not easy, is it?
No, it's very, very hard. I've spent many days crying in the shower, crying in the kitchen, because it's hard. It's very hard. It's life's not about me anymore, and I think I was very selfish prior to that, and I didn't even know.
Yeah, I think I'm the same. I think I was very selfish, and I didn't get married until I was 34. So I feel like I had so many years of just living for myself, and getting married, particularly having kids, is crazy.
It changes the game, doesn't it?
Who am I? What's is there anything left for me anymore? But it's reflecting back on women from other generations, or I do notice women who've had children very young, and they just seem to handle it a lot better. Maybe there's been time for them to develop their selfishness, and also become so educated in feministic PC culture that they haven't kind of brainwashed to that extent. So I feel like it's a bit of an unraveling, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. And I think it's almost I think a lot of people that might be listening to this would almost feel a sense of, this isn't fair, because if I'm by myself, I have to be independent. I don't have people I can necessarily rely to. I would give anything to stay at home and just look after kids and wake up 4 times a night. And so I almost feel like I would almost have the sense of, this is not fair. Like, now I spent, up until my 30s trying to survive on my own or thrive on my own. And then when I accomplish that and then meet a godly man, and now we have to all of a sudden do life together, people are expecting me to just, change my identity overnight and fit into this role. That, I think, again, and this is where I think the part of self-compassion that I like is, be kind to yourself in those seasons, because that is hard. That is a hard transition. And I think it's something you have to navigate with your partner, with, what does this look like for us?
I think so. I feel like, you got to give yourself a couple of years to adjust. I describe
100%.
it as it's like moving to a new country for a new job where you're not trained for the job and you don't speak the language.
Yes, that's a great metaphor. Because you have no idea what you're doing, and the rules change monthly.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
The rule changes every. Yep.
Oh man. And there's so many different ideas, and this is the thing that I think is difficult for women these days, is that there's so many mixed messages about what does it mean to be a woman, what does it mean to be a wife, what does it mean to be a mother. And even within a small context, like a particular demographic of Christianity, there are so many different opinions on what's right.
And it's because we are so exposed to so much knowledge now. I think we're less likely to rely on the almost simplistic truth and word of God, because it's like, well, what did this person think of this verse, and what did that person, what are their take on it? And we've kind of missed the simplicity of simply just opening up your Bible, praying, and seeing what the Bible's teaching you about God and the gospel, not what does this mean for me today? And I think if we look at it from that point of view, we're seeing the picture that God's created of family, and being connected with one another and living in unity with one another, and not for me. And I think that's the message that the world's sending to women today, is you can do it all, but we're finding that we can't. When I'm sleep deprived and I have to look after two little humans and a husband to a degree at times, I can't do it all. It's overwhelming. And then, you're left with feeling like you're failing and you're not doing a good enough job. I'm not a good enough mom. I'm not a good enough psychologist. I'm not a good enough wife. And I think that's why postnatal depression has just skyrocketed. And postnatal anxiety is just as high at the moment, because it's overwhelmingly scary. So, yeah.
Yeah, wow, it's so true, isn't it? And when you think about the roles of the husband and wife in a marriage, and particularly from coming from being, somewhat of an independent woman in terms of you making your own money, you've got your own education, you're not dependent on, I have to get married or else I'm going to die, like you have some, you had choices, you still have choices, but how would you describe the role of a godly wife, if you can put that into a paragraph or two? I know it's a huge question. Or what
That's a big question.
What have you discovered actually fits and works?
Yeah, this is probably the journey I've been on the last 2 years. So my oldest little girl is 18 months now, and I think since she's been born, I've really been challenged at what that means, because I've got quite a strong personality. I'm quite ambitious. I've got goals and still things that I'm working on that I wanted to achieve, and all of a sudden when I had a child, which I desperately wanted, it became really clear that there's different roles, that we are not the same. And for me, that was very confronting, because I kind of had this idea, like my husband to the extent doesn't have as clear dreams and desires about where he wants to go in his career, where I've always had like this, straight path of, I'm going to, get my master's, I'm going to do this for a few years, then I might do more study or write a book, or like I've always had these like, massive, where he's kind of like, I want to see where God takes me. So I felt like that was really unfair, because I'm like, I didn't stay home because I was the woman. I stayed home because I had the boobs, like biologically, I couldn't go back to work because I was recovering from vaginal birth. And there was a big part of me that wanted to spend this time with my daughter, because as a child myself, my mom's comfort means the world to me. So it was really conflicting within my heart, because there was this one part of me that almost wanted to be like a man. I almost wanted to be the provider and the person that supported my husband, but then would leave, the next. And I remember extreme jealousy when my husband would leave for work, because I'm like, but he's like, I'm tired too, and I have to work physically. In my head, I'm like, I would much rather do that than stay at home with this baby right now who screams every couple of hours. So I remember feeling extreme jealousy, and I had to grapple with that, because I just I couldn't change that, because again, I was quite determined that I wanted to breastfeed for at least 3 months. So that meant at a minimum I had to be in close proximity with my beautiful baby girl for that time. So that forced me to take a step back and say, okay, maybe this isn't the way God created it. And I started looking into what the scripture said about the role of a wife, and I started reading the scriptures that make us all feel uncomfortable. And 1 Timothy, I had them written down, but my phone just died now. 1 Timothy 2, Ephesians 5, Corinthians 14 and 11, and all these things about a wife needs to be submissive and quiet, and attend the home. And I was looking at that, kicking and screaming, because I'm like, no, I have talents, and I am special, and I'm going to be the next Joyce Meyer. Like, it was all this kind of, I'm going to do something wonderful, and now you're telling me to leave that and look after the kids. And it was almost offensive, because I feel like that was the message I got all these years. Like, if you're a stay-at-home mum, like I guess for me personally, that just seemed not good enough. And then, because I'm quite, I put a lot of pressure on myself to do well in whatever I do, I was feeling like I wasn't doing a good enough job as a mum, because of all of these kind of feelings that I was having about what's happening out there. So that really took me on this journey of looking, what does it look like to be a godly wife? And I think today I have a new freedom of, it is a joy for me to serve my husband and serve my kids, because there's no longer this pressure of having to do it all. And I don't feel like my dreams are going to be put aside. I actually feel like they're going to thrive in this context, because I am operating in the way I was created. And if you look at history, the idea of women being equal to men wasn't even on the cards till like the 1950s, 60s. It's actually a new thing if we look at history, because biologically women couldn't compete with men, because they just didn't have that, they didn't have the modern medicine or the access to do it. So I think there's a lot of pressure on women today to do it all, and I actually think that breaks God's heart, because he's saying, I've created you for more. It's not less, it's actually more, because what I'm finding now is that it's fulfilling me being able to be present with my kids, and not feel like they're taking something away from me. And yeah, that's I guess been a bit of the journey that I've been on with this.
That's a really special kind of learning, isn't it? To be able to come from there to here,
Yeah, it was hard at times, but I think at the same time, like I said, it's been completely freeing, because, and it's also changed the way my husband has seen things. He's really taken on the role of headship, and the responsibility with that. And rather than saying, the word submit is a bit tainted, where we've really learned what it means is to truly serve each other. And I found that he's come times where he's taken on that responsibility as well. Like, I can't expect you to do everything. If you have to thrive in the role as the helper, then I need to thrive in the role as the provider and the leader. And for us to do that well, we need to support each other. So there's been days where he's come home and the house has been a mess, and he's been like, what can I do to help you right now? Where before, I think he's been a bit like, well, you want to do it all, go on, show me what you are, do better. Almost. So I think it's really changed our relationship as well in that sense.
Yeah, and I think that's something that women need to understand, is that men are different to women, and what inspires them and motivates them is different to us, and that they actually want to give, and they want to help, and they want to us receive, and that makes them happy.
That does, and I think
get that, it makes life so easy.
It really, and look, easy to a degree, that you're still going to have, even with this new fresh revelation of what it means to kind of complement each other, we still fight and we still have arguments, but it's not as brutal, and it's not as intense. And yeah, like, absolutely, like, they want to help. And I think the other thing is, if as a wife you take over and kind of try to control to a degree, I think men are simple creatures, and they might be like, all right, well, they kind of sit back and then let you do that, and then you're not happy, because now that's another role you have to fulfill, and they're not happy because they feel a little bit brushed to the side. So I think it creates a lot of friction in a lot of relationships. And I guess the other thing is, there's a big message as well out there that when you choose a partner, you're choosing someone that's going to make you happy. And Timothy Keller actually talks about this in a book he wrote a couple of years ago with his wife, The Meaning of Marriage.
Yeah,
I don't know if you've
it's a great book.
Good book, great book. It's been something I often refer back to, and he talks about how, particularly in New York, Manhattan, it's all about how compatible are you to me, and are you going to tick all these boxes? And the problem is we change as people over time, and the things that you find interesting at the start annoy you a few years later, and all of a sudden this person's not making you happy anymore, and then we fall into the trap of, well, we've fallen out of love. But then if we go to the Bible talks about love being a sacrifice and a commitment and a covenant relationship rather than a taking relationship, and it just changes the game.
So where do you I guess we'll start to wrap up, but I guess I want to finish with a question of and I mean, I know you work with young people as well a lot, and where do you think that young women these days are getting their ideas about marriage and motherhood? Is there anywhere, are they getting any learning, and do you think what they're learning is helpful?
Yeah, I think there's it depends if I'm assuming a lot of people listening to this would be from Christian backgrounds. So again, a big part of that learning would probably be from the church. And I think it depends on the denomination that you're in. So we just got to be careful that what we're learning is not more from the media and from the world, to use the Christianese terms, but that is from the Bible. But I think a lot of people are getting, if you look at the subliminal messages that are being sent through movies and sitcoms and all these things, there's this big emphasis on women having to do it all. If you're a wife, you have if you're a successful woman, you have a great career, you have kids that don't throw tantrums and listen to you, you have wonderful bento boxed packed lunches and clean clothes, and I think that's causing a lot of women anxiety, because that's a lot of work, and it's very overwhelming, and it's hard. It's very hard, because once you become a mother, I think, and even in dealing with teenagers, often the conversations I have with parents, I would say, 90% of what you do as a parent is managing your own emotions, because children trigger emotions that you didn't even know you had, very intensely, very quickly. So I think sometimes it's really about, managing your own emotions as a wife, as a mum, rather than trying to control other people. So I think that plays a big part in the work I do with teenagers as well.
And just as we wrap up, is there any final thoughts or advice that you would give to women listening to us today, particularly women probably in their late 20s or even getting into their early 30s? Like, if you know women in that demographic and what they're going through, particularly as singles, is there any advice you could leave them with, or hope you want to give them for their future?
Yeah. Look, first and foremost, I think your primary energy and focus as far as a relationship goes should start with Jesus first. If you are madly in love with him and you're spending time with him, I think that will give you a sense of security and identity that even if you find a godly man, you will always need. If I rely, like I said, if I'm single and sad and depressed and thinking a husband's going to fix that, my darling girl, woman, I'm sorry, that's not going to be the case. Sex isn't always that great. Motherhood isn't always that great. It's not all, it's not all what you see on Instagram. That's just the highlight reel of people's lives. So I think my first point of advice would be, run to Jesus. Fall in love with him. Let him be your fulfillment, let him be the one pursuing you, because he loves you and he cares about you. But then I'd also say, don't overcomplicate it. Go on dates, speak to guys, look after yourself, dress up, put on some makeup, some nice lipstick. That's not a bad thing. And I think don't be afraid to strike up a conversation with someone if you think they're cute and they're lovely, and you might want to see what that could lead to. Don't overcomplicate it. Go for it.
Yeah. I love it. Oh, that's great. Oh, thank you, Nadine. Thanks so much for joining us today.
No, that's my pleasure.
Yeah, it's so great to hear from someone who's done a little bit more of the journey, and just the realities of what it's really like. So
yeah. Look, we're only in chapter 1, I think. It's only the start. But God's good, and we're learning as we go. And I think grace is a journey. So yeah.
Always. All right. Thanks, Nadine. We'll finish up there.